Good afternoon from New York, and I have with me uh, Paul Inyang from Maryland here in the United States, and also Pastor Dr. Lemmy Russel from Nigeria. He's actually in Benin City, Nigeria. So let me tell us, how is Nigeria today?
Well, weather is pretty hot here, and everything is quite humid. But all the same, I think we're okay. Weather is fair.
I think that I'll probably be speaking for Paul also when I say maybe he can send us some of that warm weather.
Yes.
You know, I am known for
We need to
telling.
trade you some warmth.
Yeah, I actually will say to people in those days that Nigerians are as warm as the weather.
Yes,
Mhm.
that is very true.
Right, and here we are dealing with winter at this time. So let's just move to our conversation for today. And I was particularly struck by something that Paul wrote on his Facebook page. It was about exactly a week ago today, actually.
Yes.
And I'll just read it back to you very quickly. And then I
Okay.
won't read all of it. I'll just read portions of it. And I will, and then I will
Okay.
go to Paul and I will ask him to tell us what exactly he was thinking about when he wrote it. He said, like many, I have observed with great trepidation the recent spate of violence with the accompanying gruesome pictures in my home. Not only do we have Boko Haram, we now have the additional election violence. I am yet to understand why the spilling of blood seems to have become the norm in our beloved country. It has become impossible to ignore. Attaching a bomb to an innocent 10-year-old to be detonated at a market, the killings of over 2,000 Nigerians in the northeastern part of our country, as reported by Amnesty International in the last week, and the burning up of PDP transportation in Benue.
Yes.
Then
Angels.
he, okay, in Jos. All right. Then he went on to say, can we say that what happened in Paris supersedes anything we have experienced in Nigeria lately? Why the difference in response? Besides the obvious ineptitude of our security apparatus, which the entire world acknowledges, what else could it be? My friends, I am left wondering, what does it take to move us or spur us into action? We are at the height of our complacency, and we have no one to blame but ourselves. It seems there is a difference in the way we value life. So,
Yeah.
Paul, that would be my jump-off point. What were you thinking, and what did you mean?
I was basically thinking about the incidents that have happened recently in the country and the movement towards greater violence and just the general lack of response from our people in terms of either saying that this is wrong or even acknowledging that it exists. It seems like we are comatose, and there doesn't seem to be a reason that we can speak up or talk about the things that are going wrong in our country. Not necessarily in the political sense, but just in terms of how we relate to one another and what we are doing to each other. It has become very, very difficult to understand it. And I was conflicted about it. I've been reflecting on this for a while, and it seems to me that our value, the way we value life has changed tremendously over the years. And I'm not sure what is driving this change.
Yeah.
Nigeria was built by strong men and women most of them went out of the country for education, but when they came back, they added value to the country. And in fact, the infrastructure that we are all enjoying in Nigeria now, quote unquote enjoying in Nigeria now, was built by those same men. men and women, and they cared. They cared what happened in the country. Blood has always been a very, very difficult thing. I mean, a very, very difficult thing in Nigeria. Nigerians have never tolerated the spilling of blood up until now. And it seems that from government to the citizenry, there has been no response at all. And so that prompted my writing.
Okay. Lemmy.
Yes, Ohiro.
Right. I actually think that, Paul has actually put many things on the table.
Yes, he's done so.
Right. He has put a lot of things on the table. And I want your perspective, not just as a scholar of religion, but also just as a clergyman. Because one of the things that he has said is exactly the way that most people outside Nigeria are looking at Nigeria right now. The fact that so much is happening, and it seems like not much is being said about it, not even the acknowledgement of right and wrong, and what used to be right, what used to be wrong now just seems right or ignored.
Yes.
And I would like you to speak.
Let me start by saying I very much share and appreciate the sentiments of Paul. I want to just speak from my own perspective here in Nigeria. I know that what we are seeing today is a cumulative effect of some things that have been built up over a long period of time. It's not something that just started out of the blues. I believe that whatever we're seeing today is a product of a whole lot of factors put together. But let me look at it from the point of, let me start by looking at it from the point of the Boko Haram, terrorism and all that. Now, for a very long time, Nigeria has been under a lot of pressure, looking at things from the point of politics, so to speak. Most parts of the northeastern part of the country has been deprived educationally, in the sense that not many of them go to school, and there's a lot of poverty out there. And at the same time, there's been a lot of factors from a family point of view. They really don't have much of values at that point. Now, so politicians are taking advantage of most of those who have been economically and socially deprived. And so they've used them as instruments to fuel their political desperate bid for power. And so much of what we are seeing today is come out of a long period of time. Because we look at the last period of the last dispensation, from the point where Jonathan took over government, we realize that a lot of Northerners, especially from that part of the country, they believe that power is exclusively their right. And when they don't find themselves in the position of power, they think they can grab it through any means whatsoever. And a group of people had actually been like looking for an opportunity to vent their anger at the system. And so this period, more or less, became the best opportunity for them to show up. So we are not unaware of the fact that while all of this started, a whole lot of institutions have been affected. Schools out there in the northeastern part of the country have been affected. A lot of churches too have been burnt down. A lot of Christians have been intimidated. So some people view it more or less like an Islamic Christian thing, but it's beyond that. Right now it's also become a political issue. And those who are in the opposition, particularly in government, they are also taking advantage of the situation. But I want to look at it from the point of what do we do, or what should we be doing to find solutions to this kind of problems? Because I believe that lack of education, bad, or what I'll call poor, family values are responsible for much of what we're seeing today.
Okay, let me stop you there and bring this discussion back to what Paul's point was, which was that we seem, that we, the Nigerian society, actually appears to have moved away from the foundational values that Nigerians had. That, for example, the people who built Nigeria, we make the point every now and again, even though sometimes it seems like it's unjust, that that Nigeria was built by people who just happened to be around at that time, and that it was an accident of biology the other way around.
Yes.
That in any case, if we had been around, we would have participated in the building also.
Yes.
But that's besides the point. The point that he's making is that they built that with some values in mind. And we had those foundational values from which we seem to have moved. It is, I know that you have introduced the discussion that we hear often about how this preceded the current government and so on. And some of us who grew up in Nigeria would remember a time in the early 80s when this kind of crisis first began to come up in Nigeria with Michael. And then we had governments that came and crushed them. So one can make the argument how come the current government hasn't done it, but that becomes a political discussion. Where I think we should be focusing this argument is what Paul is really saying. What is our responsibility to one another? Because nations can be built one person at a time. We are at a point where it seems like if you follow Paul's argument, which is your point also, leadership has failed Nigeria. So if leadership has failed, what is the responsibility of one person to another? That's to make sure that the society is really rebuilt and held up to the standard that we all would appreciate. So, Paul, let me go back to you. Where do you think that responsibility should start from, and what do you have in mind? What's the vision of the Nigeria that you have in mind?
I think that it's we have become so polarized, and we fail to understand that it's really, and maybe because I lived through the Civil War, I'm able to really remember what it was like, and that the story of the Civil War wasn't the fighting. The story were personal stories of neighbors who hurt neighbors, retribution, and unnecessary loss of life. I can remember what it was like, but there was a commitment after the Civil War for us to start seeing ourselves as one unit and begin to build our family, and to drop some our religious and ethnic cards and begin to see ourselves as one in developing a nation. And I think that we have lost that sense of purpose. For instance, it comes out in very little things. As you know, once a few years ago, I was in Abuja watching a soccer game, and the Nigerians were playing Brazil, I believe, and Nigerians were losing, of course, and the entire stadium pounded on the Nigerian soccer team, which were overmarked anyway. But for me, it was a microcosm of what is happening, in the sense that we have lost any love for ourselves, that we can't even support ourselves, even if we are down. And and we become so complacent that we don't see things like we ought to see. The hurt that is in the other person's eye, you don't see it. You just see it as just another thing that is happening. Oh well, it's happening again, and that's it. And we move on to the next thing. And like I like to say, the beat goes on. And so that is where the crux of it. I think the solution really lies in how we see ourselves and how we begin to look at ourselves personally, on a personal level, because that transcends anything that anyone says to us. whether it's leadership or from the religious pulpit, if we believe that the next person matters, then we'll need to show concern for one another in the way that it needs to be.
Okay, let me go back to you. Going, because you did say that we need to be focusing on what we do now, and that on that we all agree. And Paul actually used the analogy of the Civil War, and with the Civil War, though, there was a truce that was called. And then the process of reconciliation began. And it was one where people were not seen as winners and losers. We were all seen as one Nigeria.
As winners, yes.
Right. And so we went back to the basics. So my point to you is that I know that you do not disagree with that, because it's a discussion that we all have been having. Well, yes, but this is my point then. So what is the responsibility of community leaders? What role can they play? That is, I'm referring to pastors and teachers. If the solution is not to be found in, if all of the solution is not to be found in politics, what is the responsibility of leaders like you? And what can you do to to achieve what Paul is saying?
Thank you, Ohiro. I just want to also highlight the fact that just as much as we are not going to completely write off our leaders, we need to also collaborate with them. They need to also understand what really is at stake at this point. I usually always like to, explain the fact that a lot of us need to know that nobody chose the family that he needed to come into the world through. Nobody also chose the nation through which he would come into the world through. And those are factors that God determines. And we need to actually see God in the whole big picture of what's unfolding at our time and how we can try to, resolve issues that we find at this time. Basically, a lot of education has got to come in. We need to enlighten our people. We need to do a whole lot more in, bringing the people to appreciate the fact that we are all one, to start with, all created by God, created in His image and created in His likeness. And beyond that, for us to also appreciate the fact that whatever goals we have, we are also all going to end up at the same point at the end of our lifetime here on earth. So basically, what really do we have in contention? If we really sit down to consider the background that we all have, we discover that in one way or the other, the Northerners, the Southerners, the Westerners, we all come from one source altogether. And we should be able to appreciate, human life. We should be able to value human life and should be able to see things from the point of the oneness that it should really be at this time. Basically, as a scholar and at the same time a community leader, I lead the kingdom community here in Nigeria. I've actually been trying to do my own little bit in getting people to appreciate, what God really expects at a time like this. Basically, because this has been the thought in many quarters, if Nigeria as a nation has to stay united, we've got to come to the table. And at some point, we sit down to discuss and find out what really do we want in this whole process of our evolution as a nation. What do we really want? What do we really want for our children? What future do we want for the next generation? We really don't need to see things from a myopic, self-centered position, in the sense that we want to get all the best for ourselves. We are so desperate for power. We are so desperate for money. We want everything for ourselves. And we forget that there's a future that we need to make sacrifices for. So, for the benefit of the next generation, to a very large extent, I think we need to be able to make sacrifices. Like I said, beyond educating our people, beyond teaching them, beyond letting them know what values we need to embrace at a time like this, we also need to begin to look at life from a more vast perspective. Let's look at it from a global perspective. We have no doubt that terrorism is not just a Nigerian issue. It's not just a Nigerian, factor. It's a global crisis that we see unfolding in our time. But because we are Nigerian, we need to look at it from our own perspective. What do we do? How do we address?
Sure. From that point,
I think basically those are things we need to look at.
Right. With Paul's permission, because I know that I have referred a few times to what he wrote. And with his permission, I would like to post it on my blog this week so that you can see it. And one of the things that he said in that blog is what you have just been talking about, which I think is very powerful, that we all have a responsibility. And one of the arguments that Paul made is that one of the reasons we don't care as much as we ought is that, according to him, the victims are nameless to us. So there is no emotional connection, yet these people that are dying are somebody's mother, father, children, and family members. In the words of Robert Nesta Marley, quote, "We stand around and look. Therefore, we are all complicit, and I believe that we will answer for our actions, if nothing else, or inaction, and if nothing else, we shall live in it. Sooner or later, it will touch our lives if we do not act." And then, you should please save that quote, "not my portion" stuff. We all own this baby. May God help us all. And you should help someone.
Okay.
Yes, and that is really what you are talking about yourself. But I think that there are two things that I also want to go back to, because you did mention the role of the family. Yes. I wanted you to try to expand on that a little, because Paul actually practices psychotherapy here in the United States.
Yes.
And the role of the family, and you know that I am a psychotherapist too, and the role and the impact of the family in the American system really cannot be overemphasized. Because the family really is the place where children very often are acculturated to become the adults that they end up becoming. That's where they're socialized. So the question that I want to ask you, and then if you speak for just a few moments, because we are almost out of time, and then I would have Paul just take off from there. What is missing in the family, in the role of the family today, from what we know? Why is this happening now? And when it didn't happen before, has the family just become, the family system, has it become so powerless that it's no longer able to teach the values to us or to children the way that it did when we were all growing up? What is missing, and how, and what can be recaptured, and how do we go about it?
Okay, should I respond to that?
Yes, and then Paul.
Okay, well, the way I see it really is, for us to be able to reach family, there are platforms. And I particularly, I have some television programs. I'm on 2 stations currently on TV, and then I have a radio program. And in recent times, I've been speaking to families, basically. And it's a platform that I've actually used to try to get a lot of people back to restoring the right kind of values. It starts from the point of order. Now, if the foundations are right, our marriage foundations are right, our family foundations are right, and there's order within the family, a whole lot of things will flow the way God expects it to flow. But because we have a lot of dysfunctional people in the system, where people who have no family backgrounds, because their fathers probably were not there when they were raised up, and they suffered a whole lot of things. They become easy prey in the society, and we find such people becoming a core of those that we might refer to as the street urchins. And sometimes these people are vulnerable. They are the main problems that we have. They are the ones easily being used to perpetrate a lot of this violence that we find today. So we want to keep talking to them. We use the platform that we have. And then we have an NGO, which we call Rehab Initiative Foundation. Now, we started that quite recently. And we want to use that foundation as a platform to also begin to try to help out to reaching some of these kind of people. That's the whole essence of what we are doing with this initiative. We want to reach them. We want to make sure that everyone who is similarly displaced, because the Bible talks about setting the solitary in families. We want to give them a hope. We want to give them a sense of purpose, a sense of direction. Those who have needs for skills, they need to be given skills to make them more useful to the societies rather than being tools in the hands of, desperate politicians. And I think these are some of the things we are doing at this time.
Yeah, thank you very much, and please continue to do what you're doing, because one of the things that we know is that nations can be built one person at a time, and if we catch them young, then there may yet be hope for the society. Paul, please.
Yes, I'm so glad to hear what Dr. Lemmy talked about in terms of their action, some of the things that they are doing on ground to reach the families. But also, I think that when we look at family, we need to be more inclusive than just the fringe of people who are aberrant and are acting because of things that they do not have. What is happening in Nigeria supersedes that. It encompasses even the families that have, they say, the so-called properly built families. Because some of the kids that I see or I run into in Nigeria when I'm there are generally from very good families. But somewhere along the line, the message has gotten lost. So we need to go back to really reaching everybody, each and every individual, and trying to get to empower them to see themselves as valuable, so that they will begin to see others as valuable also, and be less dependent on aberrant behavior and engaging in things that would take us away from that. I think that this is only the beginning of the discussion. And I think that as we have more discussions, we will be able to suggest more. But I always look at it from the psychological point of view, and that emotional connection that we ought to have, the empathy we need to have for others, the ability to connect with others, no matter what race, what their race is. Yesterday I was talking to a group of people, and it was about. Someone asked me, "How are you doing, sir?" And I said, "Allah in Ana." And and someone shouted from the group and said, "The poor man's prayer." And I said, "No, the poor and the rich man's prayer." And that is what it should be. Because simply what I was saying is that God is alive. I was trying to say that God is alive and well. I'm there. So, but it is typically the poor man's prayer, because they have nothing else to offer. But I think that this is something that encompasses a broad range of people and everybody, and we need to re-energize our people and bring our people back to what will help them.
Thank you very much, Paul and Dr. Russel. I am glad, that Paul, I believe that you have given me permission to share that.
Yes, most definitely.
Right, and I also am glad that you actually said that this is the beginning of the conversations, and we are going to continue to have these conversations without stopping at all, because we have a responsibility to do this. So, Lemmy, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening in Nigeria. And maybe you can save us some roasted corn, right, for the next time that Paul and I visit home. And Paul and I try to do little things here and there. We'll try to do whatever we can. And he was actually with me. We were together in Nigeria speaking at the University of Port Harcourt several months ago. Okay. But he actually goes to Nigeria much more frequently than I do.
Oh, that would be nice.
Right, he does, and you guys should meet one of these days in Nigeria. So, have a very good evening, very good night there. Regards to your family. And,
Thank you so much. This has been a very good forum for Russel. So,
Thank you.
good to see you.
Yes, and I will be calling on you again very, very soon, so that we can continue to have this dialogue. Thank you. And,
thank you very much, Dr. Ohiro.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.